This podcast was produced by OAR FM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On the Air.
Right On, showcasing the work of Otago Southland writers. I'm Beverly Martens. Join me for news and interviews with local writers on the second Wednesday of every month from noon till 1 and replayed the following Sunday at 1 p.m. Right On is brought to you by the Otago Southland branch of the New Zealand Society of Authors and kindly supported by the great team at the University Bookshop.
What do you want to be when you grow up? They say you are what you read, and the University Bookshop can help you be whoever you want to be. Do you want to be an athlete? Then sit down with an inspiring sports biography. Do you fancy yourself as a detective? We have a grisly lineup of murder mysteries waiting just for you. Do you aspire to be the world's greatest chef? We have cookbooks to tantalise your taste buds. Do you want to celebrate your inner child? Play up in our fabulous children's room. The University Bookshop, helping you decide what you want to be when you grow up.
Hello and welcome to Right On, brought to you by the Otago Southland branch of the New Zealand Society of Authors. Now this month is all about the graft and craft of writing a novel, from both ends of a writing life, because my first guest is a newbie author, Martinette Williams, who knew nothing about writing a book but did it anyway. And my second guest is a writer of long and impressive standing, Chris Else, who knows pretty much all there is to know about the New Zealand writing scene and also as a writer himself, but he still does it anyway. So first up, let's hear from Martinette, who I talked to a couple of days ago. This month I'm joined by a debut novelist, Martinette Williams, who lives here in Dunedin and has written a rather charming book called Everything She Wanted, which was launched last month at the University Bookshop.
Yes.
So a huge achievement to get that out in the world, Martinette. Congratulations. Can you tell our listeners what this book is about and why you wanted to write it?
Okay. It's about it's loosely based on my last year of university when I was 21, and I went through this very interesting relationship with a guy, and it really affected me in a huge way and sort of changed the trajectory of my life, I think. And so I felt compelled to write about it 10 years after it all happened. And yeah.
And why did it take you 10 years? You know, that's kind of a long time from what happened and then writing about it. Why did it take that long? Did you need that time to sort of work out what the hell had happened?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think what happened was it all happened and I wrote these songs about him. And then in the book, you'll see that I get into a different relationship, and that's how I kind of ended up getting married to this other person. And then I was very much in that relationship and I didn't think about the other guy, or I tried not to. You know, I kind of just buried it. And then it was 10 years later that I finally started to process, wow, this really affected me, and it kind of changed who I was, and it changed the way that I saw the world, because I was quite a naive and hopeful kind of person, and he sort of made me more jaded, you know, and yeah, so.
And wary.
Yes, definitely. Didn't really trust people after everything that happened. So it was good to finally think about it and process it, and writing about it really helped me to forgive him for what he did and kind of forgive myself for the decisions that I made.
And in terms of writing the book, it's kind of a year in the life of.
Yes.
Really, isn't it?
Definitely.
You know, it's a year in the life of a young woman in the 21st century as a student in Dunedin, and I think you capture. I mean, the minutiae is quite. It's this happened and then that happened. And, you know, in a way, nothing happens, but everything happens.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, that's completely exactly how it happened. Yeah, that's a very good way to describe it.
And I think, I think I can see there's sort of Sally Rooney, you know, normal people and conversations with friends.
I love those books.
Yeah, but you can sort of see that pervading it. And you know, what it's really about, I think, is just that. Just the way young people stumble around in the world.
Yeah.
You know, they don't quite know what they're doing, but they don't want to let on.
Yes.
They definitely don't want to cause conflict because their friend peer group, you know, having just left home and living in often a different city or flatting or whatever, they don't want to let on, if there's anything going wrong with them or there's anything going wrong in relationships, they don't want to let, everything's fine, they're saying, no, nothing to see here, it's all good.
Yes.
We'll all go out as friends, in inverted commas. And my gosh, that friend label is completely misused.
Yes, completely.
Yeah.
It was very much like that. You've completely, you understand exactly what it was like. Yeah, back then. And it probably still now. It's like that with friendships, especially when they become kind of like your found family once you leave home.
It's a great description, found family. Yeah.
Yes.
I always talk about my family of origin being, and then I sort of talk about my friends as my whānau, but found family, you're right. You go out and seek those relationships because you're going through a new stage of your life. And I think what's really important about and what's so bonding, why those friendships often end up being lifelong. I mean, some of them you can't remember the next week, but the ones that stick are because you're going through so many firsts, aren't you?
Yes.
First time away from home, first time managing your own money.
Yes.
First time flatting together, first serious relationships, first jobs, all of that.
Yep. Studying for the first time in like a serious way for a lot of us.
Yeah. Where the consequences are higher in every area of your life, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So looking back on that 10 years later, being a different person and wearing, having different values maybe even, I understand what really helped you keep the book in the present, as it were, was a journal that you kept?
Yes. Yeah, so I kept a journal. I was actually a frequent journaler back then. A journalist? Not a journalist. That's a different thing completely. I was constantly writing in my journals back then. I had a lot of feelings, and I remember even like people asked me recently, like, do you still keep a journal? I'm like, no, because my husband would find it and read it and be upset because all I did was I would just like emotionally purge everything into these journals because I didn't have anyone else to talk to about it. So I would just be like, rah, in these journals, right? It's all the pain that I was feeling and all the confusion. So I wrote about this guy a lot. It was every entry was about him basically. So I had a lot of stuff to mine from.
Do you look back on that and be slightly embarrassed?
Yeah, definitely.
That you gave him that much?
I was obsessed with him.
Yeah, that he had the starring role.
I know, but I was 21. I mean, he was like my first love. Like I felt so many strong emotions towards him, and yeah, it is embarrassing looking back, but I mean, it happened, and I was young, and
absolutely. And I look back, I've journaled or diaried or whatever you want to call it, at various stages of my life, and I'm quite pleased I have. But I think, oh my God, I hope that's not my legacy. If I was to suddenly get hit by a bus and people started, found these in my, my hall cupboard and read them, they'd think, God. How self-absorbed and moaning is she?
That's what a journal is, though.
Yes.
Otherwise, you're saying it to your friends. But the thing is, when you read the book, you'll see that like Madeline doesn't want to tell her friends what he's doing because they already don't like him. So I didn't have that option. I had to write about it in the journal so that no one else knew how bad things really were.
Yeah, and I think that's a sadness that, I think a lot of young people hide essential truths. Either from themselves, but particularly from their friends, because they're so desperate to be liked and be included in the group. And of course, if you do break up with someone, you might have to leave that group through awkwardness. And so you go just, oh, no, it's all good.
Exactly.
Even when it's not. And I think you captured that really, really well.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I guess what were the challenges in writing it then?
Well, finding the time to write was a big one. I've got 2 young children who I don't have people hate when I say I don't have a job. I'm a stay-at-home mum. I'm a kept wife or whatever. I'm there for my kids. I'm there to look after them, be there when they come home from kindergarten and school, take them to the appointments. So I do have a job as a mum, but I don't have like a 9-to-5 job. So it was hard to find time sometimes to write, but managed to carve out a few hours a day to write, which was really good. But it was hard to stay on track as well because the book is so autobiographical. It was very triggering and traumatic sometimes to write about these things. And I didn't know if I even wanted to put this out because it was so personal. So the fact that it's out is quite scary.
Right. Have you had, I bet you haven't had any negative reactions though.
No, none so far.
Yeah.
But I am putting myself out there to be judged because it is, Madeline is based on me and people do know that. So, I don't know.
And as a, apart from all the angst in it, which is totally relatable. And I'm not the target market. I'm a different generation from you, but I think young women will read that and go, yes, 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 on, lots of pages.
Yes.
But for me, some of the more, putting that to one side in terms of the milieu of the story, the things that I found interesting as an older reader were a couple of things. I'd like to go into them in a bit more detail.
Yeah.
Firstly, the character's sobriety. Now, that is a very unusual choice for a young person, and it's completely against the tide, shall we call it that, the tide of Dunedin student culture.
Yes.
And we've just seen that. I mean,
on the high street.
Yeah. Hyde Street was quite well managed, but sort of Paddy's.
Oh, St. Patrick's Day.
Was
that was
not.
Yeah, that was true.
And there's a lot of out of control events like that.
Yeah, definitely.
So, so I found that interesting. Why did you want to put that in? And yeah. Well,
that's just true to life. I had given up drinking when I was 19 years old. So by the time I was 21, I still wasn't drinking. And I think it was important to have Madeline be sober, because otherwise you'd be reading the book being like, why is she not going to parties? Why is she not, she's clearly upset. Why is she not getting drunk? And, confessing her love to this guy and, just being a bit of a mess. But it's because she wasn't doing that anymore. She did it in her past. And now she's sort of like in a different stage where she's not drinking anymore.
Yes, so that made you sort of slightly apart from the crowd, as it were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it also it maybe helps readers to understand why she doesn't have a boyfriend as well, because maybe the guys don't like a girl who doesn't drink, harder to get her to do what they want her to do. I don't know, but
well, let's face it, most of the moves get made late in the night, don't they? Everyone stands around and whatever, and then the pairing off happens later, and alcohol is usually
alcohol's usually involved.
Yeah,
exactly.
I would think so. So I think that was really good to show a different way of being, and the pros and cons of that.
Yeah.
The other thing was that the parental characters, now because I'm closer to their age than yours, I found that really interesting. Now it's very, when you're in your young 20s, you're definitely trying to sort of respect your parents, but and still have a relationship with them, but it's less important than your friends, and you're trying to, create and back yourself and your own identities and your own choices and things.
Yeah.
That's definitely a strong part of that life, an important part of that life stage. But I was a little bit shocked in that the parental characters, the tensions I think are deeper than for some other people at that life stage. They're not particularly supportive, and in some cases they're downright mean. And I thought that was brilliant and brave of you to show, family dynamics and all their unglory. Was that hard to write?
That was hard to write, yeah. But it was important again to show that I think the reason Madeline is she gets so obsessed with this guy and she's so fixated on getting a boyfriend is because she wants someone in her life who's going to help her through the relationship she has with her parents, and she kind of wants someone on her side. So that kind of emphasizes why she wants a boyfriend so badly. Because I think people could read it and think, why is she so obsessed with getting a boyfriend? It's not that serious. But she's very, it's a big deal for her. And when she thinks she meets the right one, she's she goes all in, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we don't want to give too many spoiler alerts.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a couple of things to talk about within that. One is, I think, I'm a different generation. And so it was the kind of, I wouldn't say a man completes you, but often we were, I was at the tail end of women thinking about marriage and children and being the helpmeet, and, maybe the man was still kind of whatever the man wanted came first.
Yes.
All that kind of thing. In a way, when I was reading that, I was thinking, gosh, not really. And have we come very far in the 2020? Well, this is 2012.
That
it's set, but do you know what I mean? You would like to think that, but that woman wanted more than that. I'm doing that in quote marks. But what's interesting, I think, is that you've been sold a pup as well, because women do want more, but they are expected to want everything You know, ironic because this is called Everything.
Yeah.
You know, your book's called Everything She Wanted.
Yeah.
But they also carry still the mental load. You know, like
Yeah.
that's not that achievable either, is it?
No, it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's hard because feminism teaches us, we don't need a man, but like I do need a man, and I did need a man back then too. Not to like take care of me, but just to have someone who's like going into the battle with you, and you know, like someone to support you in that way.
And I don't know if it was Emily Dickinson or someone, but there's that great quote about love is not looking at each other, but looking in the same direction.
Yeah.
And I think that's where true partnerships sort of come from, don't they?
And I think it's okay to want that as well.
And that's what, you know, this is kind of, I don't know, I'm sorry if this is a slight spoiler alert, but it is interesting is that through all that angst, because it is, you know, it is very universal. I think, you know, we're seeing it through Madeline's eyes, but you could, any number of young women would feel the same.
Yeah.
And their friends and everything. And then she sort of has this revelation near the end of the book where she goes, I don't know if he likes me a lot, but I'm going to find out. I'm going to ask him.
Yeah.
And you may as well have dropped a grenade in your friends group. They go, what? Can you do that?
Yes.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Oh my God, what will he say?
Yeah.
You know, well, who knows what he'll say? Because, but you know, there's so many assumptions.
Exactly.
And, you know, based
it's so blurry.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. So I think, you know, I think that's great. So, I think that's something that people should hang on to and people should always do in their lives. And it's bloody hard. You know, you know, I'm still struggling at my life stage to actually be clear about what I want.
Yeah.
Oh, I might know that bit, but then to actually ask for it. And I think it's a double burden for women.
Definitely.
You know, because you think, oh, you know, just let them do that. And then, you know, eventually you're thinking, I've behaved really well. I'm a fabulously supportive person. It's going to be my turn.
Yes.
You know, it's never your turn.
No, it's not.
Is it? So, yeah. So I think that's the kind of, that's a nice upbeatness.
Yeah. It's definitely not all doom and gloom, whoever is listening to this. It does have like a happy ending.
No,
unquote.
It's not. But there's, you know, there's definitely emotional truth in there. And
it's very angsty.
Yeah.
But that's okay.
That's totally okay. All right, now let's go to the more upbeat. The third thing that I liked and thought was unique about your book is the fact that you are a musician and you wrote some songs. In fact, that go with the book, and there's QR codes within the book, very modern, where you can listen to those songs, and they are sort of the soundtrack for the book.
Yes.
But what's interesting is that you did that first, didn't
I did.
you?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
Yep.
So without, I don't know if you knew it at the time, but you were actually, it was kind of the plot summary of the book.
Yes, it was.
Told in song. So tell us all about that.
Okay, so as I was going through all the stuff in 2012, writing in my journal, angsting away, I was also writing songs. So I'd been a songwriter for a few years before this point, and this guy just gave me all of the inspiration to write. I wrote like 10 songs about him, only included the best ones in the book. But yeah, I was writing songs about him all the time because I was just feeling so many different things throughout that year. And I didn't know it at the time, but yeah, it did become sort of the groundwork for the novel. It's almost like the novel is the context to the songs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so did that really sort of launch your career as a musician?
I think it did, yeah. So if you read the book, everything I went through in the book is what made me the songwriter that I am today. It really helped me with my songwriting. Yeah.
And so tell us about your life as a musician in the here and now.
Since writing the book, I started to go back to, I didn't really do open mics beforehand. So Madeline does a lot of performing stuff, and I didn't, like when I was that age, I didn't do as much as she did, but it kind of made me jealous of her as I was writing it and after I was finished. So I started to go to open mics, and I started to play a lot more and meeting different people. And since I wrote the book, I've joined a band and we play covers gigs and we actually make money, which is insane to me. And I'm writing new songs. I released a new EP. So yeah, it's really like rekindled my love for music.
Isn't that fabulous?
Yeah, crazy. That's something I didn't expect from writing the book, but that is what happened.
And it was a decade-long process, writing that book. You know, bloody hard and out in the wilderness quite a lot.
Yeah.
What do you wish you knew that you know now that you didn't know then? Because, you've joined the Society of Authors now, you're aware of resources, that kind of thing, people to help you on that journey.
Yeah.
What would be the one thing?
I wish that I'd known, I should have joined a writers group before I started writing probably, because I didn't even join the writers group I'm in now until after I'd finished writing. But they were very supportive, and I'm really glad that I'm part of that group now because they've given me invaluable advice, and just being there and giving me encouragement has been so awesome. But it would have been a lot better if I'd known about them before I'd started writing. Yeah, and probably getting involved in the writing scene in Dunedin, because it was a very solitary experience for me. I didn't even tell people I was writing the book. That's something else that's interesting. I was writing the book for 2 years and I didn't tell anyone about it because I didn't want anyone to tell me that's stupid or what gives you the right to write something, oh, that's so cliche, or oh, you're writing a novel, embarrassing. So I just didn't tell anyone because I wanted to just write it and then be I wrote a novel, I've already done it. It's already finished.
Right.
Yeah.
And it clearly hasn't put you off because you're working on some new projects now. Do you want to just briefly tell us about those?
Yep. So I've got the first draft done of a second novel, but it's about relationships and it deals with trauma and a lot of triggering themes. So I'm just kind of shelving that for now because it's a lot. But I've started working on a third novel, which is more like a romance, which is what I like to read. I'm a romance girly. So I've only just started writing it, but I'm really excited to keep working on it because it's definitely what I enjoy. And writing this first novel was really hard for me. It's not really the kind of thing I would want to read as a reader. I do like women's fiction, but I'm way more into a romance where it's a lot less heavy. So yeah, it's going to be nice to do something
Well,
more.
also I think, you've got a really busy life.
Yes, I do.
You're juggling lots of things. So, your head's pretty full.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with reading for entertainment.
That's what it is, exactly. Yeah. Life is quite serious and, there's a lot of bad stuff happening all the time. So I just prefer to read stuff that's happy and fluffy and just a fun thing to, engage with.
Excellent. Really great to talk to you, Martinette. Thanks for being so honest. Congratulations again on your debut novel, which is Everything She Wanted. And it's, as I say, we had the launch at University Bookshop. Very charming because you were singing your songs as well.
Yeah.
So it's available there and it's available online.
Yes.
And we're going to wrap this up by playing one of the songs in your book, which coincidentally and brilliantly is called The Last Song.
Yes.
So we're going to play that now.
Okay. Thank you for having me.
The stars that night goodbye to whatever this was.
And that was Martinette Williams with her own song, the last song, which is part of the soundtrack of her debut novel, Everything She Wanted. And now I'd like to welcome Chris Else into the studio. Thanks for coming in, Chris. And very much the reason I wanted to talk to you is because the NZSA, of which you've twice been president and been branch chair here and really been a contributor to the literary scene, is that at the moment they are calling for applicants for the manuscript assessment service. Yep. Which they, which they offer once a year, and 13 lucky recipients get that service. And I know you and Barbara have been part of that process sometimes, helping people through that channel. But of course, this is your sort of bread and butter, as it were, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, manuscript assessments. They are what you and Barbara do in your business life, running Total Fiction Services, which you set up in the late 1980s and is still going strong. So I think this is just a brilliant chance to talk about manuscript assessments. Can you tell us what you do and, what's your sort of raison d'etre of Total Fiction Services?
What, as far as the assessments go, well, I would see an assessment as being a part of the rewriting process. Although it may be useful if you've got writer's block, you're stuck with something like on page 100 and you don't know where to go, an assessment would be useful at that point. But typically it's for people who have a manuscript. And
we're talking about sort of a half-polished manuscript too, aren't we? Not the shitty first draft,
No. It's, people generally these days look for feedback somewhere. And it's often with friends and relatives.
Which is the wrong place.
Well, that's not entirely useless. Another way they go is writers' groups. Of course, many people belong to writers' groups, and they get feedback from there. The difficulties with that sort of process is really, I think the purpose of an assessment is to help you to find the problems in the manuscript. And the difficulty with, for example, going to a writers group and doing that is what writers do if you give them a manuscript. They see what's wrong with it, but then they immediately try to solve it.
Yep. So their way, not your way.
Yep. What you get then is a whole lot of solutions, which isn't much use to you. And what you really need is someone who can articulate the problems in such a way that you know how to fix them. And that is not necessarily easy to do. It's easy enough to say, well, this is a bit boring, or I don't like this character very much, but that isn't helpful. You've got to be able to say why the manuscript doesn't work in this particular
and
way.
instill the kind of confidence, I guess, and enthusiasm for them to want to pick it back up, because otherwise they're going to just put it in their bottom drawer and start something else potentially.
Well, yes, exactly. Sometimes that's the best thing to
do. Yes, and also I would just make a comment about writing groups, of which I've been, I've done a couple of writing courses in a writing group, is that you never see the whole thing in total. Someone brings along a chapter and you might dick with that, as it were, but with the manuscript assessment, you're looking at the overall, you're looking at the whole thing, which I think is,
Yes, and indeed, I suppose you might see the whole book, but it's, you see a chapter a month, which isn't really
exactly. That's what really I mean. Whereas when they deal with you. So how do you operate? People get in touch and say, I'd like, help me, basically.
Well,
how do you?
Yes, it's people do get in touch with you. It's almost all by email now, and we don't really advertise. It all comes through word of mouth, really. People who've used the service before. And also we get recommendations from publishers. Some publishers say, "Oh, I quite like this, but it
Needs more
doesn't
work
work for
and
me,"
yeah.
you might consider getting a manuscript assessment on it, and it comes through that way. So what we do is we get a word count, and we base the quote on a word count. So we give everybody a fixed quote, and then we read the manuscript and write a report. And typically the report has 3 or 4 sections in it. The way I do it, Barbara does it slightly differently, but the way I do it is there's an introduction and I always begin by saying what I make of the manuscript, what I think the writer is trying to do with it, because
They may not always know.
I may get it entirely wrong, and if I get it entirely wrong, then clearly publishers are going to get it entirely wrong too. So we need to sort that out. So I say what I think the writer is trying to do, and then I look at the problems I see in the manuscript, and that's probably that would be the bulk of the report, really, used typically. And then at the end, there's some suggestions or discussion, or where to go next. Really, that's the last section, and that seems to work pretty well, I think, as an approach. Then we send it back, and it's up to the writer then to do it. We do always say, if you've got any questions, get in touch. So sometimes there's a little discussion. Occasionally it might be a phone call or to follow up. But, that's pretty much the process.
And what are the most, generalising now, what are the most common mistakes that you see?
I think the most common mistake really is to do with the relationship between the character and the narrative, the way in, and that is, people very often, it isn't always the case, but typically very often people have quite a good plot. They've thought everything out in terms of the plot, but they haven't thought about what you would call maybe the inner journey of the character, where the psychology, the underlying psychology of the story is going. And of course, it's from that inner journey that things like themes and the drama of the story comes from.
And the resonating. I mean, you want to trust your character to take you through whatever they're going through, and you want to piggyback on them, don't you? And you,
yes, indeed. Yeah. And I mean, if you're enjoying a novel, you need to be hooked, and you are hooked because there is something about the character which engages you, and something about the problem they have to solve. And typically, there is a significant problem at the core of the character's journey that they have to solve. And you and that's really what's key. And this is why it's often quite difficult to point out what the problems are, because that is...
Because in all James Bond, spy thrillers where you've got to save the world in the next 24 seconds.
Yeah, that's right.
It's people's lives are, often novels are quite sort of domestic, for want of a better term, aren't they?
Well, yes, there are all kinds.
Yes.
And we see all kinds. We see quite a few thrillers and crime novels. We see quite a bit of historical fiction. People still writing, keen to explore the past in some ways. And what you might call, what you've just said, sort of domestic stories, ordinary life. Quite a bit of science fiction and fantasy as well. It's
I think for me, the mark of a good book is if it raises that question, well, what would I do? If I was in the character's situation, what would I do? And then I think if it makes you think about that, then that's job well done.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, how frank do you have to be? I mean, do people take your advice, or how frank do you have to be?
Well, it is difficult because on the one hand, you don't want to crush somebody. And we have people sometimes come along and say, well, all I want to know is whether I should keep going with this, whether it's got a future. And that is a really difficult question to answer. I mean, we've had clients. I can remember one chap we had many years ago now, who was quite persistent in sending us stuff, and we thought, oh, this isn't really awfully very good. It's not really going on, but the guy wants to. The guy wants to keep going. It's his interest, and so on. And then suddenly he turns up with a manuscript which finishes up winning an award, because writing is a process through which you improve through practice and through thinking about what you do and thinking about what you read and think about other people's work. But that isn't a linear thing.
Yes. So he was just dogged, basically. He just kept going. He was the tortoise.
Yes, and exactly. And suddenly he was he was into what has become quite a reasonable career, successful career. Yeah,
fantastic. And you certainly have had, over the years, you've had some big names that you've helped along the way in terms of providing support and feedback and steering them in a direction that they may not have realised they needed to go in.
Yes.
Rachel King, Alan Duff.
Alan Duff.
Yeah,
yes.
And some more recent people, I think.
Family in some ways. I mean, Emma Neal, of course, is my stepdaughter.
Yes.
And so she'd be one of our more successful clients. And of course, Barbara and I assess each other's work in that sense. So, yes.
So it's a family firm in that way.
It is indeed. There's a writer called Rachel Craw, who's a young adult writer who is very successful. She published a trilogy with the name of the publishing house is gone for the moment. Yes, in Australia, and she's been very successful.
And actually, that begs the question, which I hadn't thought of till right now, Chris. I'm assuming that all your clients are New Zealanders, but then is that the case?
They are largely,
but they may not be living here.
They're not all living in New Zealand, though.
Right.
I guess you'd probably maybe say 10% are Kiwis overseas, and there have been one or two Australians. I don't think we've had any American or English clients, but but they are. We've had people in Denmark and Singapore, but they have been New Zealanders.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, what I wondered, seeing you've been doing it for, haven't quite done the maths, but 40 years?
Getting on.
Yeah.
Yes. Mm.
What have you seen the genres change? Are you getting more of
There's been a lot of changes in New Zealand publishing and in the book business in New Zealand over 40 years. My goodness, yes. Mm. I mean, the real the heyday for fiction generally, and certainly in New Zealand, would have been the 90s. Mm.
And Barbara talked about that in her President of Honour address this year, didn't she? Yeah.
Yeah. And there has been, lately there has been, there was the merger of Penguin and Random House meant that there was less fiction being published, essentially. Mm-hmm. And around about, if you say about 15 years ago, I would think the publishing trade was pretty rough. And it's still very difficult now, especially even for the big companies. But there are more and more there are more smaller companies coming back into the market, and people are. It used to be that self-publishing was absolutely a no-no.
Yeah, it was a vanity project, and,
Yes,
and there was
indeed.
the implication was definitely, well, you're not good enough to get published. That is no longer the case.
No, that isn't the case now. I mean, self-published books do win awards and are shortlisted for awards and so on, and so that's been quite a big change recently.
Mm-hmm. And sorry,
No,
I was just going to say that we're just leading on from that, really. So there've always been challenges in the publishing industry.
Yes,
it feels like there's more now, but I think there's just always been kind of issues. I think two of the big things now is that there are so many competing entertainment options, and the second one, of course, that scaring the bejesus out of a lot of creatives is AI. Have you got any sort of thoughts about that?
No, I think it's too early to say where AI will go and how people will respond to it. I can't imagine it. I mean, I can't imagine an AI program writing any great literature.
No, it's more the copyright issues of the AI bots sort of scraping the internet and taking people's work as part of their data source.
That is certainly a problem, and quite what the solution to that is not at all clear at the moment. I feel we're all sort of playing catch up with that a little bit, but at least NZSA are, that is one of their key things that they are trying to. Copyright's always been an issue, of course, hasn't it, with books? Even I've been in Asia 20 years ago, and pirated books are on every street corner, aren't they? I think it's a measure of the business that we really don't do much in the way of being an agent anymore.
Right.
We did quite a bit going back to the 90s, but it's a tough business now.
Right. Yeah. So what keeps you sustained and keeps you going and passionate about writing? About writing.
About writing.
Yeah. How do you keep plugged in and
well, personally, my own writing, it's just, I can't not do it. It's an addiction, essentially. So, I mean, I sometimes view my life to basically what I've done is to work to support my addiction, which is a bit like a drug addict in that sense. But, yeah, so I've found recently that I've been writing a lot more poetry recently, which is a big change for me.
Yeah.
So the writing has changed, but I write all the time, really.
You've got a great back catalogue of several novels. Gith and Waterline would be two of my favourites.
Oh, right, okay.
And particularly Waterline was sort of climate adjacent, wasn't it? I thought that was a brilliant novel, and it was just enough in the future to still be very relatable, but kind of think, like made me think, as well. So
I think that's a really interesting space to write in the near future. Timing these days is really a big question, a problem for writers, because things change so rapidly. Things like technology and even the world itself. I mean,
and politics.
So,
clearly, politics. I mean, we've just watched
incredibly volatile.
Right
absolutely.
Yeah.
So people need to really think very clearly about what time they're writing in. To be writing in the present and is you run the risk of it being obsolete. But you could be writing 5-10 years ago, as long as you make it clear that that's when you're writing. And
Martinette's book was set in 2012 and very clear about that.
Yes, that's right.
But you're right, and I always feel that there's that dilemma with the COVID pandemic.
Yes.
Does that date the novel?
Yes.
Does it? does it kind of make it yesterday's news already? That these things are quite tricky.
Yes.
Have you had to advise people on things like that in terms of time periods?
Yeah, well, it's often necessary to make things clear, and of course, you really, if you're writing about the past, then you run into the problems of anachronism. So you've got to know the time either through research or through experience to know it really quite well. Otherwise, you can get kind of glaring errors, which the readers
will happily point out.
Yes.
I think with me, with historical fiction, if I'm reading in that genre and it's not, I'm not enjoying it as a reader, I think if you do go back in the past, you have to strap on a pair and be quite brave and actually write as you can't, to me, you can't put 21st century social mores and morals and ways of, enlightenment now.
No, what they call presentism. It's it's a bad move.
To bring that back when things were a bit more, misogynistic. Or,
yes, I think that is a difficulty that which we see in quite a bit of historical fiction. Quite oddly enough, there's a not so much now, but there was a time when we got a lot of manuscripts which were from women writing about women in the 19th century, colonial times, and that it had a lot of it exactly that problem. They were you didn't get a sense that they were really 19th century women. They were kind of time travelled back from the 20th century.
21st century woman wearing tea gowns.
Yes, exactly. Yes, and bonnets and things. Yes.
Interesting. All right. Any final comments about manuscript assessment?
No, I think I think it's a valuable thing to do, and I think that the best time to do it is when you have got the manuscript into the best shape you can, and you want to you want to improve it further. That will be the best time to do it.
Right. Yeah. So you've done some of the work, but you're a bit stuck, and you want to get it move it towards publication.
Or you want to make sure it's
as good as you think it is.
It really is, of
yes,
course.
That's true. Yeah,
that's the trouble.
You're right that you need a professional, impartial opinion on it. Yeah, good point. Hey, well, thanks so much for your for coming in, Chris. Your experience and expertise. We're lucky to have both you and Barbara here in Dunedin. Now, the applications for the NZSA manuscript assessment service are open to members right now until the end of May, but of course you can always get in touch with Chris and Barbara at Total Fiction Services any time that it's right for you, and do that via their website, which is www.elsewhere.co.nz, and elsewhere is spelled ELSEWARE. So that's elsewhere.co.nz. Thanks again, Chris. Right, now I'm just going to wrap up the show now with a couple of event reminders that I'm sure listeners would like to know about and participate in if they're here in Dunedin. So get your diaries out for some events starting from next week. The first one is on Tuesday the 15th of April, and it is a coffee and pie session. Who doesn't want to go to that? It's kind of run by the University Bookshop, Grid Coffee Roasters, Paddy's Cream, and the Princess Street Butcher. And essentially, it's a night whereby two different authors are going to be talking about their books. So it's an after-work coffee and pie session. And Celeste Wong is a Dunedin-born and UK-based top coffee barista, and she's home for a visit. And so she'll be speaking about her book, and also then photographer, storyteller, author, and seasoned surfer, snowboarder is the other speaker, which is Derek Morrison, and he's the author of the book New Zealand Gourmet Pies. So go ahead and buy tickets at any of those 4 businesses that I mentioned. The other nice kind of side line to that event is that $5 of each ticket is going to the Dunedin Night Shelter. So a very worthy cause there. The next event is something that I mentioned last month on the show to sort of diary ahead of time, and now it's going to, it's coming up fast, and you definitely, whilst it's free, you must RSVP because it's very popular, and that is the Mountains We Climb. Now, that's the memorial tribute to poet and conservationist Brian Turner. It's an event that's going to be held at the Otago Museum. There will be readings of his poetry, a short film about Brian in which I think he reads his own poetry, and then that's followed up by a talk by his good friend and fellow mountaineer Philip Temple. So that's Wednesday the 16th of April, and tickets are free, but you must reserve your seat because they've already had to go to a bigger venue. So it's wilddunedin.nz is where you need to express your interest in going along to that. And then finally, things are getting quite complicated in the next few weeks because we've got Easter and Anzac Day, and it's all going, school holidays, it's all going on. But there is an event on the Thursday, the 24th of April at UBS, and that is for children because it is a new book released by one of New Zealand's favourite children's authors, Joy Cowley. Now, I'm delighted, for those of you who don't know, to tell you that Joy recently moved here to Dunedin, and so I will be definitely shoulder tapping her to come on to the show in the very near future. But meanwhile, if you've got young children or grandchildren that you want to take along, it's Thursday the 24th of April, 10:30 at the University Bookshop to meet Joy and hear her read her latest book called Twigs and Stones. And that's our show. So thank you very much for listening. Thanks very much to Martinette Williams and Chris Else, and of course our lovely sponsors, the University Bookshop. Catch you next time.
What do you want to be when you grow up? They say you are what you read, and the University Bookshop can help you be whoever you want to be. Do you want to be an athlete? Then sit down with an inspiring sports biography. Do you fancy yourself as a detective? We have a grisly lineup of murder mysteries waiting just for you. Do you aspire to be the world's greatest chef? We have cookbooks to tantalise your taste buds. Do you want to celebrate your inner child? Play up in our fabulous children's room. The University Bookshop, helping you decide what you want to be when you grow up.
This podcast was produced by OAR FM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On the Air.